Welcome to another episode of Hope on Road. This is your host, Brandon Kenyon. For anyone that's new, and this is your first listen, this episode, welcome. If any of you have been listening since the start, thank you so much for bearing with me as I navigate the waters of podcasting since April. Last episode I talked about how it was a segue into this episode, the next one, and the following. This episode and the next episode in particular were the episodes formulating and starting to be created back on October 21st. And I didn't know where I was going with the episodes. So sometimes when I don't rush it and put out content each week, it's better for me because I fully want to live the experience of life and what I'm actually talking about and tying into and connecting in each episode, like the topics, for example. This episode in particular goes into more depth with astrology for those of you that have been asking about astrology, are more interested in it. I know the last episode that I put out a few days ago, it was a lot of content that I have learned over the past 2 years and discerned and intuitively felt was the best, explaining certain things in astrology. And I actually went through the experience, connecting the dots, if you will. So I like that. You know, I was listening to older episodes back in like May, how I had this bright idea of having a second podcast about all astrology. I'm so glad I didn't do that. First of all, I like to take on huge tasks without realizing the work that I'm getting into with everything. I need to build my full depth into really being 100% invested in this podcast, only because I'm detaching from the mindset all over the years listening to authority figures in society about, well, you need to work. Well, no, I'm doing what I want to do, what I love to do, to feel fulfilled. And if it provides income, the more the merrier. I feel like it's this moment, this conscious shift that's happening all over the world. And you can feel it too, especially if you're more aware than you were before, I should say. Because a lot of people, especially in my age, are waking up, quote unquote, to what's insulting to their soul, what's not them, what has been conditioned since birth in our minds. So, every week is a new experience. It's a new dance in the unknown. As scary as that is, it's an adventure for sure. But this episode, astrology-wise, I'm going to talk about the energy and the recent eclipses, the lunar and solar eclipse that actually happened about 6 months ago, back the end of April into May. Well, they come back around. So every year there's a lunar and solar eclipse. So I'm going to go into more depth and detail. I know I talk about it, but it's all scattered in the 5th episode of this series. Because I didn't want it to be just an astrology podcast. I wanted it to be more experience-based. But as you probably noticed the last episode, if you listened to it, I had to write a lot of the stuff that I was speaking down because it was a lot of content that I would have forgot a lot of stuff. Because I do like to ramble when I go on my tangents that pertain to what I'm talking about, the whole premise and topic of the actual episode. But this series is evolving every episode, just like I am, and growing. And, as I clear out some of that emotional baggage that's been weighing me down my whole life, it opens up room for creative energy. And I definitely talk in depth about that the last episode. So if you haven't checked out episode 12, it's mainly about connection and connecting with your intuition more and connecting with yourself to connect with others in humanity. So check that out. But this episode, and if you are listening to this episode, then I guess you're a Swiftie, because I don't know a lot of Swifties, honestly, because I don't know, it's like everyone loves Taylor Swift or nobody likes her in my life. And it's like, okay, well, I'm my own man on this one. I have a few friends from Pittsburgh, and my friend Jess, who I'm staying with currently in Virginia, she's a Swiftie. So I heard about the incident of trying to get tickets over the past few days. So back in 2015, I was front row at Heinz Field down in Pittsburgh for her 1989 tour, and it was the most epic experience ever. Like, it was just insane. And at the time, I think I only paid like $300 for that ticket, and I got it that day on Ticketmaster, where they like resell. So it was just like, I was just blown out of the water, and it was just so wild how close I was to her. But there's all these tour dates, and yeah, they're all sold out apparently, but for next year, and I don't know exactly on road where I'm going to be. So just one day at a time with that. But I will be at one of the concerts, let me tell you. And I talk about in the first episode how her song from Fearless, Innocent, really spoke to me when it first came out. And I was like, something is really going to happen to me at age 32. And what do you know? This whole spiritual journey, if you will, that I've been on and fully invested in. It's all I could think about. At first I tried to like run from it and just like forget about it, but it's me. I'm remembering something. So bear with me through the content, but if you really like astrology, this is a cool episode because I kind of connect everything that's been happening between two of my favorite musicians over the recent weeks, their little feud, how astrology ties into all of it. It's so wild. And I just don't know exactly how it's going to play out. I don't know if I'm even correct, but I intuitively feel that it's legitimate. But more on that later. I'm going to first talk about the eclipses, what even an eclipse is for those of you that are not sure in astronomy or astrology, and what I've learned that they are. And I'm going to talk about what's happened to me during eclipse season through working with the shadows of the eclipse and being brought to the surface of what still needs released emotionally during my growth. And if you can think back over the past few weeks of how you felt, or some of that icky feelings or emotional trauma or stress that you went through, even though you couldn't pinpoint where exactly it was coming from, just think about that as you learn about this. So eclipses happen every year, and they change signs. So the nodes of the moon, the north and south node, they're in eclipses for about 18 months, and then they change into two new signs. So right now, the south node is in Scorpio, and the north node of the moon is in Taurus since the end of November of 2021. And then in 2023, they shift again, but it goes backwards. So the south node would be in Libra, going backwards in an astrological chart. So 8th zodiac is Scorpio, 7th zodiac is Libra. And the North Node goes from Taurus, which is the second zodiac sign, to Aries, which is the first zodiac sign. So it kind of goes backwards if you look at it like a clock. But I don't want to veer too much into the lunar nodes of the moon, because I'm going to talk about that in a little bit and how it ties into and correlates with the solar and lunar eclipses, and how all of this astrology ties in with one of my favorite musicians ever since I first seen her perform opening up for Rascal Flatts back in 2009. You know, one of the first openers, and now she's a global pop sensation. And it's just wild to be a fan and be on her journey. And her recent release of her newest album, Midnights, that came out on October 21st of this year, is her best work yet. It blew my mind, and it's lined up with my own personal growth journey too, and it's very healing, and it's great music, and I'm going to talk all about that and how it all connects with the astrological transits in Scorpio season. It is currently Sagittarius season now, and I'm a Sagittarius sun as well as she is. Her birthday's 2 days before mine, but I'm a year older than her almost. And we're both from Pennsylvania, so it's kind of cool to have similarities. And her album is probably her best work yet, only because it really shows that herself as a musician, as someone of public notoriety, really opens up for fans all over the world and anyone who listens to her music about her own insecurities and self-loathing that she did and fears that she has had as an adult too, just like all of us. So this episode really talks about, for myself, how to fear less through life. It's what limits us. And if you're gonna self-loathe, like I do every other day, honestly, I'll be honest with you, just remember to do it swiftly. And start showing more compassion and forgiveness to yourself. And that's what I'm trying to do for myself as well. You know, it's a moment by moment, day by day process. But just to try, even if some days you fail, just keep getting back up and going. You know, the energy of the eclipse season a few weeks ago has dissipated, but it came back around for me, and I just went through another process the past week, ever since the day after Thanksgiving, of just my shadow self and being aware of when I'm self-victimizing and just not my true essence, and gaining further insight and understanding. But in a little bit later in this episode, I'm going to talk about all the stuff that has surfaced during the eclipse season and this shadowy energy. And even if you're not really aware of energy work with astrology as one of the modalities to gain further insight for your own self and how to work with that energy, try to think back of your thoughts and your feelings, if you can remember, over the month of November, end of October. And you can take away whatever information you learn about the astrology aspect from this episode and apply it towards the next eclipse season, which is April, May-ish of 2023. So first, let's talk about what is an eclipse. Eclipse is when the moon partially or totally blocks the light of the sun as it passes in front. So solar eclipses coincide with new moons. So with new moons, though, in general, they represent new beginnings. And on October 23rd, 2022, the weekend when Taylor Swift announced and released her album and Drake announced his new upcoming album, all in that transit between the sun in Libra into Scorpio. So on October 25th, 2022, there was a new moon in Scorpio. And it was a partial solar eclipse in the sign of Scorpio. Since new moons always coincide with solar eclipses, right? And they always are in the sign that the sun is currently in, new moons. So this lunation, though, was transformative and intense because it was in Scorpio. And it reminded us that all endings are beginnings in disguise in some point or way from another. In all periods of loss, transition, and closure, the seeds of new life are already being planted. So despite how shadowy or dark or intense that eclipse is, new seeds are still planted because it's a new moon. But this eclipse is definitely connected to the lunar south node until the middle of 2023. And the south node in astrology, it's the tail of the dragon, as you might say, or hear. It's associated with our past selves and old emotional attachments that no longer serve us. Our emotional body that we need to slough off and get rid of to make room for what truly serves our soul and our true essence. And this could be just from our childhood or past lives or whatever you personally believe in your truth and in your soul. Now, a lunar eclipse, this occurs when the full moon enters the shadow of the earth, which cuts off all or part of the sunlight reflected off the moon. Lunar eclipses are technically visible from the entire night side of Earth. So, on November 8th, it was an election day total lunar eclipse in the sign of Taurus. For most of the US and Canada, the entire lunar eclipse in Taurus will be visible. Now, I've heard from actual astrologers not to really dive into that shadowy energy, so I don't know, it just really resonated with me back in the beginning of this year with the eclipses. So I don't really go out looking at them, even though they are picturesque and I'm sure a sight to see, but it's just like shadowy energy, which I'm going to be working through anyways as I become more aware of the shadow work in my own life. But the eclipse moon, I don't know if you've seen it personally, whoever's listening to this, when it actually happened last month, but it was a strange coppery sight. And it's actually referred to as the blood moon. And this is the first time, actually, in U.S. history that we were able to experience an election day total lunar eclipse. It's never happened before, and it won't happen again until 2394. I thought that was a fun fact that I actually seen on some type of news channel on my iPhone. But the energy from these eclipses was definitely different than 6 months ago. And it just unearthed a deeper understanding into what first started becoming unearthed 6 months ago. Just as I went back and listened to the beginning of my podcast that started right around the first eclipses of this year, in how I speak and talk about my experience and everything I'm learning to share with all of you is growing and expanding in creativity and just in wisdom. But just because, in the spiral of life you go through something and learn something and completed the lesson, so to speak, doesn't mean that it won't come back around. It's a lifelong process. And from the beginning of this journey, I accepted that right away. Because it just made sense when I was unearthing certain truths that I feel like were always floating around. I just didn't have the words for them. Now, in the shadows with eclipse season and of my own experience, this is what I have uncovered and understood deeper as eclipse energy is finally dissipating for myself, at least, in real time. It is definitely stronger than a regular full moon and new moon when there's an eclipse involved. But, after Thanksgiving until recent, like this whole week, it was just another swing of deep, shadowy energy. But being present and fully immersed in the human experience is something that was unearthed deeper that I need to focus on. It's a day-by-day process ever since I've been on this newfound journey at the end of 2020. As well as being brave enough to take risks. Because without risk and pushing myself into moments of discomfort, there will be no reward or even wisdom learned. But I feel like I've been so within almost too much. This all stems to the lesson of balance. Balance connecting with myself, with my learning, my creative pursuits, and also my relationships. I have this fear of immersing my new mindset back into relationships. And this fear that my internal home will be disrupted because of the empathy growing as my awareness grows, and always putting everyone else before me first. Just being aware of this over recent years, I was mind blown. I honestly didn't accept it at first. I was like, I'm not a people pleaser. But I catch myself being that way. It's like everyone first. I feel like I'm too engrossed in this subservient mindset where there's moments in my life where I was complete opposite though. That authoritative mindset, but almost too much. So I need to strike a balance in that sense. Being okay with setting a boundary and putting myself first, despite someone else's emotional reaction to that situation. The episode 15 coming after the little bonus episode is about boundaries, and it dives into my self-criticism and second-guessing of who I really am. And am I really setting a boundary or just running, just avoiding? Sometimes boundaries with those you love looks like running, but that's when you have to be brave. Imposter syndrome has been surfaced as well during this eclipse season, especially of my creative pursuits. I so desperately seek for security in the material world since the loss of my job, the end of 2021. Within literal days of last year's eclipse season, I might add, in November. Is money really everything in terms of my self-worth? It's a relationship in exchange with money. My understanding of a scarcity mindset and how it is always played in my life has been excavated for deeper truths during this eclipse season. Money isn't everything. Yes, I understand this. I hear it all the time. But with inflation as it is right now, how peanut butter is $10 and Oreos are $8, and I got a box of Raisin Bran and it was filled halfway, you can go fuck yourself, capitalism. But taking a step back, right? It's interesting how relying on others for their help and graciousness has taken precedent over my do everything myself mentality that I've always had instilled inside. Self-victimization under my breath and in my head is an ongoing war I struggle with. And I'm okay to admit that. But it's one of the many things I'm working on in showing compassion towards, even if it's back to square one on some of the days. I want to chase and be chased, so to speak. That's something I have to learn on my own to strike the balance, but the energy of my familial ties has kept me in a codependent fascination. With no bounds, I never had the innate confidence of supporting myself. This comes along with emotional maturity, being linked to self-security in all aspects of my human life. Just bringing these notions to my awareness is a gift in of itself. A lot of our shadow aspects, anti-hero, past selves, emotions, and attachments, bang in our feelings and asking us to let them out of the subconscious loops and patterns that run amok in and day out in our unawareness back there. You know what I mean? Like, I should have paid attention in psych class when I first went to college because it would make more sense back then. But, my 20s, I just wanted to come out of my shell and just be wowed. Self-actualization and awareness really is everything. And honestly, what success is all about. I was talking to my friend Ashley. She lives in Southwest DC, and I was staying with her for almost a month, I would say. And this was all during the eclipse season, basically all of Scorpio season. And we were talking about this topic when we were walking our dog along the water, and mindset towards money and being in a headspace and frequency that I deserve these things and I am grateful for its process and shift is a birthright. Everyone, though, is on their own clock and achieves this in their own time. So perseverance and patience are also being unearthed as part of the whole lesson of my life of love. Okay, so on October 21st, 2022, I met Tay between midnight and 3 a.m. This date was about 2 days before Scorpio season started. The sun in Libra was transiting into Scorpio on October 23rd, 2022. It is interesting to me because Tay is a Sagittarius sun, being born on December 13th, 1989. She is a Cancer moon, but astrologers that are into pop culture and celebrity birth charts are unclear of her rising sign, probably because of privacy issues in her actual birth time. But my intuition is telling me something otherwise. There is an argument that she is either a Capricorn or Scorpio rising. I myself am a Scorpio rising. And when she announced her vinyl Midnights, you could purchase 4 different covers to make a clock out of the 4 squares. I started connecting with this notion by notion in my mind, right? Going crazy. Meet her at midnight, ? I thought. Here's another Easter egg for us, just like on her TikToks. Libra would be her 12th house as a Scorpio rising, as it is for me. My first house is Scorpio, and Libra is my 12th house in whole sign astrology. Antihero was the first song that I kept playing over and over when that album was released that Friday. About 4 days until the partial solar eclipse would occur in Scorpio. With eclipse energy, certain energy types can feel the energy well before or days after the new and the full moon, regardless if there's an eclipse or not. With eclipse energy, however, it can be the full lunar cycle. You can feel the effects of the shadowy energy. Roughly around 35 days. And this whole week since Thanksgiving, I was in that shadowy energy again, more than ever. Every song on this new album, though, feels like a page out of my own journal. When she goes in depth about the song meanings on her IG Reels, if you go on her Instagram account, it can be applied to any of us in regards to relationships. To me, though, it's the relationship with myself. New moons are all about new beginnings. This is an example of using the energy to plant new seeds. Music raises our vibration more than anything else. It is subjective, however, when it comes to what you listen to. It stores in your subconscious, so make sure you always pay attention to how you feel after whatever genre or artist you listen to. I know when I listen to my playlist of all my female rappers that I'm obsessed with, I get a little aggressive and angry. And, gets rough around here, honestly. Like, literally, it just changes my, vibe sometimes. But being aware of that, you can shift your mindset out of that. Taylor Swift, however, she really opens up about her insecurities, like I said, deeply with the rest of the world. The Midnights album is raw, authentic, and it's just her emotionally maturing. I think that's why I vibe with it more than any of her other albums. So where does Drake come into all of this? The Canadian rapper Drake announced via Instagram Saturday, right before the Libra transit into Scorpio, at the end of his Instagram video he posted for the music video Jimmy Cooks from his Dance High Energy album from this past summer with 21 Savage featured on it. And at the end of the video, they announced a rumored collab album titled Her Loss, which originally was supposed to be released October 28th of this year. a few days after the announcement, it later got pushed back to November 4th, 2022, because one of the owners of his record label that he created, Noah 40, I don't know his last name actually, but I'm very interested in his art though. But nonetheless, he got sick with COVID, so they pushed the album release back, which is interesting because that is the day that my grandmother, my mom's mom, passed away. Not the same day, but years in advance, on November 4th. But, so I'm just pumped, though, for my two favorite artists releasing new music, right? I'm trying to give you a feel of how I was feeling. Within a week apart. And this all ended up being right before the new moon lunar eclipse and right before the full moon total solar eclipse in Taurus, with the November 4th release date of Drake's album with 21 Savage. Taylor's was right before the lunar, or the solar, sorry, I get those confused all the time. And Drake's was a few days before the lunar. Wild. It's interesting, though, because Scorpio is my south node right now in my first house, because I'm a Scorpio rising. That's where the eclipse is, the south node is right now. And that technically would be Taylor's too right now until about July of 2023, when it switches into Libra. And the first house is the house of self for everyone, self-image, how we appear and present ourselves to the rest of the world, etc. Now, in episode 15, I dive into Scorpio season. I know we're in Sagittarius in real time and at the release of this episode, but like I said, it's the start of my birth chart, so I want to talk about each sign and go through it and how it's affecting me currently. So, like with this episode, you're getting a little introduction to Scorpio, and I'm talking about my sun sign too, in my second house, a little bit, but the similarities between having a Scorpio sun and Scorpio rising, I'll also talk about in that episode. I also dive into the movie Drive from 2011 with Ryan Gosling and his nifty scorpion jacket that I did for a Halloween costume. And Drake's sun sign, he's a Scorpio sun. He has a Cancer moon, and his rising is Leo. That's confirmed. And I just talk about boundaries. That's the whole topic of that episode. The podcast episode title connects to my own experience and the media. Hit me in the middle of the night on October 22nd, that Saturday, into Sunday, October 23rd, right when Libra was transiting into Scorpio. Like, I was formulating everything I was going to talk about back then, right? Over a month ago. Like I said in the last episode, the Sunday evening into Monday, which was chronologically November 14th into November 15th, 2022, a couple weeks ago, I finally pulled this episode, the last episode, episode 15, and then episode 16. I'm just giving you the numbers to kind of follow my logic here, but I just pulled it all together because it was accumulation of different things I was learning during this eclipse season this time around. And it all began right when Libra transited into Scorpio. And the night that I started gaining more creativity and connecting the dots with everything about how, okay, Taylor Swift has a Cancer moon, Drake has a Cancer moon, my mom has a Cancer moon. Like all these connections, right? You might look and say those are just coincidences, but nothing's coincidence. It's all synchronized. And the more you build your awareness, the more you understand that. But the interesting thing, though, is the night that I was formulating this, right? November 14th into November 15th, the moon was actually in Cancer. So Cancer is the zodiac sign that rules my 9th house. And I have my Chiron placement in Cancer in the 9th house, the wounded healer, the wound that we carry throughout this life. I go to much more detail into that back on the bonus episode, specifically episode 10, for those that are new to the podcast or want clarification. The mother wound, technically, we all carry with Chiron and Cancer in particular. I learned a few tricks from the moon, its ruler. The moon in its dark phase is no more distant from Earth than the moon in its fullness. Dimming my light doesn't mean I'm abandoning anyone. Rest for myself can also be a devotional act. So the wound that I carry is an abandonment issue wound, more specifically. So if I want to rest against what others say, what society says, like if I'm not pushing myself like everyone else because my energy is different than most of humanity, that's okay. My needs come before what other people have told me, authority figures, conditioning experts, literally, I was going to say asperts. You know what I mean? Those people that are just here to inflict trauma onto you so you can learn from it, in a sense. It's time to put yourself first so you can help the rest. This segues into the upcoming episode about setting boundaries after the bonus episode that's coming up that I threw in there for you, and how I struggle to know if I'm avoiding or actually setting a boundary currently in my life. My mother, oddly enough, has a Cancer moon sign. My moon sign at birth is Pisces. And since I was born early in the morning, the moon is considered my light leader. My moon placement is in my 5th house, which the 5th house, for everyone, is the part of your chart that is about pleasure, creativity, children, how you relate to children, and your own children if you have them. And my North node at birth as well is also positioned in my 5th house, with my moon all ruled by the sign of Pisces, which, like Cancer, is a water sign as well. So the moon, though, is actually the ruler of the zodiac sign Cancer. Now, get this. My mom's mother, my gram, she passed away when I was 16. I miss her very much. I was in 10th grade. But her sun sign is Cancer. So look at on my mom's side, the lineage. Do you see the connection? The mother wound. Since my Chiron, my wound, is in the sign of Cancer. The connection. It's weird, isn't it? Like, wild. My intuition when I was connecting these dots was extremely heightened. So being able to connect more was in the flow of more creative energy that I just embodied, that I can put into upcoming episodes with this podcast project. From the start of the recent eclipse season, from October 25th of this year, all the way until December 22nd of this year, Jupiter, the biggest planet in our solar system, is sextiled, which is an aspect. It's a good energy aspect to my natal Jupiter. So, real-time transit against my natal birth chart. And those are the aspects that you might hear about. But I talk about this personal transit in more depth in the episode previous to this one. But this eclipse season just initiated a new quest for knowledge. So if you're listening to this episode, it's the first episode of the series, or like I said before, or you want to learn more about transits, how they work, from examples from my own chart, make sure you check out episode 12, the episode before this, to get more understanding and just to see it all flow. But that eclipse season, though, initiating this new quest for knowledge, it brought also light to my conscious awareness that the ideas that I'm so drawn to, so eager to share through connection to my day-to-day out there in the world, and all the wisdom that comes from these experiences, are the very same teachings and wisdom I most need to learn from. I said this towards the beginning of this podcast series, I remember. Since the first two eclipses when I started this at the end of April, beginning of May of 2022, of how healing it is to voice my ideas, get my thoughts out there, share my story, like a voice journal, right? Which this has just opened up a 6-month period to an even deeper understanding with these recent eclipses. Because the same type of eclipses happened 6 months ago, and it was just a different vibe this time around compared to 6 months ago. And that just shows growth for my own self in 6 months. And that's a way you can reflect on that. That old age adage, for a better lack of words, of sticking with something, like living in a different place or a job for at least 6 months, is now actually, in my own experience, finally. It makes sense. But as I recap, I intuitively believe T Swift is a Scorpio rising, like myself, and we have known she is a Sagittarius sun, like myself as well. So now, recording this episode in over a month in the making, we're now in the season of our solar return. As I record this episode, and when it will be released in real time, but more specifically on November 22nd, 2022, we have just entered Sagittarius season, as the sun transited from Scorpio into the 9th zodiac. This is my own personal solar return, as well as Taylor's, like I said before. And when I first started recording this episode, basically the introduction, the new moon took place in the sign of Sagittarius as well, on November 23rd, 2022. Having a new beginning in the first lunation after an eclipse season brings a sense of fearlessness and light at the end of the tunnel. Because Scorpio represents darkness, intensity, death before rebirth. So having a new moon in the throes of a fire sign is very good energy. And just moments after that lunation took place, Jupiter also stationed direct from its retrograde phase. So for those that are new to astrology or just aren't astrology enthusiasts, this is necessary since Jupiter is actually the ruler of Sagittarius. And when it comes to retrograde, all planets experience a retrograde motion at one point or another. The notorious Mercury retrograde might ring a bell. Retrograde means that Earth is passing it in orbit, whatever planet is in retrograde at the time. So it appears that the planet in retrograde is actually moving backwards from our vantage point on Earth. But Jupiter is the biggest planet in the solar system, and it brings abundance, luck, and just expansive energy. So even when it's in retrograde, it's really not like the so much negative connotation you might get, like you might hear around Mercury retrograde. It actually still benefits us. I go into some detail in the last episode about the significance of Jupiter and what it actually means to me in my own experience. The Sagittarius sun is positioned in my own birth chart in my second house. This is the house for everyone that rules finances, assets, and resources. The sun sign embodies for everyone our personality, our identity, and where we shine. For Sagittarius suns, like Taylor and myself, which I can't speak for her obviously, but her disappointment and reach to even the Attorney General about her upcoming tour and the ticket debacle speaks for itself. We fully embody that life is what we make it, and there's nothing we love more than the promise of great adventure we hold to ourselves and others in this life and who we live with. We're always eager to explore and take to the open road. Just leaving my comfort zone, doing this podcast, literally leaving my home on Hope Road and living like a new age nomad. Well, kind of, since the end of July. Instilling this hope in others, and most importantly, myself, as I tackle this war that is occurring within. During this new moon in Sagittarius that came to lunation last week, I planted new seeds into financial abundance and prosperity with the opportunity that this lunation is giving. This is the luckiest lunation we probably have had in a long time. Planting the seeds to go out and just pursue my dreams, plans, and goals to the best of my ability. With this new moon energy, it can be channeled before and after to come out of this dark tunnel that we've been in and carry out the wisdom from the dark into the light. Always keeping the light and the flame lit as I fearlessly face the unknown. This is about freedom, the highest expression, and the true wisdom we each can share through our own experiences and personal stories. In connection to what was brought to the surface, though, for myself during the recent eclipse season, about the imposter syndrome I talked about, and my actual perceptions and thoughts of my own contributions, talents, and assets to this material plane, I started to think that we each have the right to rebirth and renew whenever we feel like it. To have a fresh start after releasing and letting go, as we grapple with loss of selves, personal selves that we thought we knew that weren't of our true essence. For myself, I'm just losing control now. The more I trust and love my own self, as I release those past selves, where I didn't love myself enough, where I didn't trust myself enough, it's a lifelong process. I can be 100% honest with that. As I hold on and let go, moment by moment. Life is chaos, and it's out of control as well. And I'm sure you're thinking yours is just the same. But the good thing is through the chaos, we can learn to control how we internally react to the outside forces that are out of our control. But Sagittarius is the truth seeker and teacher archetype, the one who brings knowledge and light. This archetype is being triggered in myself as I share my experience just on this podcast. I am leaving what is known and familiar as I embrace the unknown. My ideals are brought to the surface. What I believe in is being manifested into my reality. I'm learning to be bold, courageous, in my pursuit, always questioning and always expanding. The medicine is in the poison, just like I talked about, again for reference, on episode 10 about Chiron and the wounded healer. The healing of the wound is the wound. The funny thing is, and even lyrically in the Archer song on the Lover album by Taylor Swift, I can look back on my own experience where I too have been the archer and the prey, moving from darkness to light, which is part of the purpose of a Scorpio rising. We all have the archetypes of each zodiac if you think about it. Wherever the zodiac falls in your chart and the house number it rules brings the energy to that area of your life, and as well how you can work with that particular energy. For some of you, get excited because it really is like a video game, this life. Working with the unlocking of the energy levels and archetypes, even just with this one modality of astrology, makes it more fun and empowering. I don't want to speak too much in depth with my sun sign season though, since the upcoming episode after the bonus episode that I decided to throw in there, I dive deep into Scorpio season astrologically. So even though I did go on a little tangent here, as always, I'm sorry for the confusion for some of you with particular personality types that like sequential logical flow. But for those of you that are really interested in the formation of my creative journey and the astrological points I am connecting throughout my life, make sure and refer back to the last episode and the next couple in order to get the full picture of Scorpio and eclipse season, no matter when you stumble upon this episode in your life. Surprise, surprise, there is going to be a bonus episode. I know at the beginning of this episode, I said the next episode is part of the compilation of my journey since the end of October, but I figure after this episode, we should keep the Swift train going, and I'm just gonna tie in a not as long, I promise, episode all about karma. Not only is Karma the title of one of my new favorite catchy songs that's off her recent Midnight's album, but it's a concept we all have heard of, one way or another. Through further understanding of what it means in this life, To me now, it's something to not fear, but use as an opportunity to pivot my own life and take action when becoming okay, finally. I say that as in you get more comfortable being uncomfortable with just rolling with the punches and all the experiences life puts you through. And if you can be aware of that, or at least try, if you can, in the moment, remember that life is for you and not against you. That's what I'm trying to embody when I'm having my moments of doubt and bitterness, and self-victimization becomes the forefront of my mood in whatever is going on each day. And when things aren't going your way, it's a full court press. That's what karma is, to change your mind and do things and push you out of your comfort zone to look at a situation that you're in from a different perspective. When one door closes, many more open if you just take a look. So check out that bonus episode. I'm going to release it this weekend. And don't forget, I have music for this episode and the bonus episode. I curated separate playlists, which I have been doing the past few episodes, all lyrically and rhythmically inspiring me throughout the creation process of all my episodes. Music is my number one, so I found an outlet and a way to incorporate that into this podcast. So if music is your muse as well, listen and feel through the lyrics and the sounds and gain further insight into my own creative process. But those playlists are on Apple Music and Spotify. I have both, and I know everyone has their preference. So it's at least on those two platforms. And the link for those playlists are in the show notes. As always, thanks for tuning in. Much love and be safe, and I'll see you on the next one. Hey, thanks for hitting the road with me today. And guess what? We didn't run out of gas. So please subscribe to this podcast series to never miss a new episode. And be sure to download, like, and comment on each episode on whatever podcast platform you listen to on. As always, share this with someone you love. And make sure to follow @HopeOnRoad on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you.